NOS4A22, Book 2, Trust No One, Chapter 2, No Chance. Stu had a printer that the local newspaper utilized. It was his bread and butter, more than the funeral home business that employed his parents. Stu, as a young man, began his first employment as the young man who the local newspaper used to distribute their rags. It wasn't the biggest town, obviously, but still had over 20,000 occupants living within their county. So it was sufficient for him to stay afloat and keep his head above water amongst the drowning, ever-present depths of life. Who would have thought that the local paper boy was in business with the man who was eating flesh of the downtrodden drug fiends? No one had the slightest clue. Stu was the innocent young man who stayed to himself, printing the next paper all the locals read. That's all he was to all who knew of him, and that's all Stu wanted to be to anyone. Even the girl he thought he might like. If he only knew this young innocent girl would be the best thing that would ever happen to him. At this point of his early experiments, though, he wasn't concerned. He only wanted to achieve this consistent state of euphoria directly caused by drug-infused cannibalism. Little did he know that he was about to meet his life partner. One day, soon after his early cannibalistic experimentation with injecting dead bodies with the PCP he got from his drug addict neighbor, who was friends with the girl he liked, she rang his doorbell. He was intrigued by her pressing initiative and wondered in marvel as to why she would have possibly rung his doorbell. Why she was here, he couldn't possibly guess. He had shut her out and in his mind cut her out of his reality as he knew it forever. But there she was, ringing his doorbell. Why on earth would this be happening? He asked himself as he looked through the peephole of the front door of his parents' funeral home door entrance. Stu wished that she weren't there, so he wouldn't have to configure in his deranged mind any excuses to go back to his experimental psychopathic work. But he knew he couldn't leave once he realized she wasn't leaving. He did in fact wait a good while, hoping that she would leave after ringing the doorbell a couple times. He watched her move uncomfortably, shifting her weight from hip to hip, weight on each foot to the other as to not sit with all her weight on one foot for longer than 30 seconds. He finally decided to open the door after staring at her for a good couple minutes through the peephole. Holy shit, you actually answered. Were you whacking off or what? She asked with a naughty grin. Get off my porch, I'm busy, he said as he tried to close the door, but she put her hand on the door by the lock before he could have the courage to slam her fingers in the door. Let go. I need to get back to work, Stu said like a future college professor disturbed during a final exam. Fuck you then. I was trying to help you, she said as she began to storm off. Wait, I'm sorry, will you come in? Stu opened the door and held it. You're an asshole, you know that, right? She said, trying to look mad but couldn't help but smile. I hope it's as it seems, he smiled. What the fuck's that supposed to mean? She quickly changed her expression to a frown. Natural progression towards the unnatural. He changed his genuinely happy smile to an awkward one. Fuck you. She turned around quickly, giving her awkward stare back to him. I wish, he quickly replied, shocking her with excitement. I thought you'd never ask. She couldn't contain herself to jump on him and start heavily kissing him. They went in the front room, and Stewart anal fucked her on the floor. God damn, that was crazy, he said as soon as they were done. Sorry, I can't believe I did that. She quickly put her clothes back on as he struggled buttoning his pants. No, thank you. I never did it before, he shyly admitted. Really? I never did it before either, she excitedly said. Wow, I can't believe it, he said in a euphoric state of ecstasy. Why? She honestly asked, clueless. You really seemed to know what you were doing, he shyly said, looking to the floor, too embarrassed to make eye contact. Ha ha! Well, you were real aggressive, even if you were on your back. She smiled hugely. I couldn't help myself. That was awesome. He was beside himself with the glow of extreme orgasmic fulfillment. Okay, so I'm really into you. But I don't even know you. That scares me, she said reluctantly. Will you be my girlfriend? Then you can get to know me, he said as innocently as a young child. I want to, but that's such a weird question to say out loud. I can't believe you said that. She secretly became aroused as she said the words. Well, it was nice meeting you, he said sadly, as if he had been defeated. You dumbass, I'm not leaving. I'm never leaving you. She clinged to his arm. Are you serious? Well, let me show you something then. If you can accept this, then I'll know you were meant for me. He grabbed her hand to hold it and guided her in the back room. What are you about to show me? Are you a serial killer? She smiled, crazily huge, half joking. No, but I grew up around dead bodies. Look, this house is my parents' old funeral home. I naturally inherited it, he said without smiling, but with all the excitement in his voice as a smile. No way, that's so cool, she said as she spun like a ballerina. I guess you are for me. I can't believe it, he said as if he couldn't believe he was awake, as if he were still in dreamland. I am for you, she said with contained excitement until she spit out the words. They hugged and kissed as she jumped on him, wrapping her arms around him. There's something else I need to show you. Well, a couple things, he grudgingly said. You're not normal, are you? Are you some sick freak? She said with an honest expression. Yes, I am, a real sicko, he said in sincerity as he drew back a curtain that covered a doorway arch. There was no door to this doorway that led to a small hallway, but only this long draped curtain that was red mixed with small white rectangles woven within the pattern that made it almost look like TV fuzz, except being black, white, gray. It was red, white, gray, but with an almost Muppet quality fuzzy red thick border. There on the tables were corpses, missing limbs, sections of flesh in various areas of their bodies, and each opened with a standard T-cut procedure. Hollow carcasses with no organs and dried out like leather. There was an actually pleasant, clean, fresh smell. Her eyes got big and lit up with more excitement. Wow! I'm really turned on right now. This is like unbelievable. It's a fantasy I never thought I'd be able to talk about, let alone live out for real. She was completely mind blown. I must be dreaming. Well, that's not all. I need to show you something else. This really is not normal. He grabbed her hand again to guide her in the furthest back room, where there he had his personal art gallery. Holy shit. You are sick. Just like me. She jumped on him again to wrap her arms around him and strongly smooch. I really can't believe it. You must be a figment of my imagination, he said in a panic of disbelief. I can't believe you're real, she said in utter excitement. She was staring at each art piece. From the left to the right of the room around the walls, there was a bar-like C-shaped island with polished cedar countertop. There was an old man's perfectly surgically decapitated head with a hand popping out of the mouth, and the wrist looked like the tongue, but just with a burly hand at the end of it. The hand had its tight finger-tipped grip going down the chin down to the throat. The eyes were almost popping out and lacquered over, as the whole art piece was completely lacquered over, just like the dozen others. Altogether, there were 13 strangely unique corpse creations. The next piece was an upper part of a torso with a complete rib cage and upper part of the spine up to the neck bone. It had sinew coming off the edges of each bone and resembled spider webs, but thicker. The fibers of the torn muscle tissue looked like as if it had been synthetically designed that way, because it was so amazingly geometric and intricate with design just simply naturally. The word naturally is derived from the word nature, and this piece could make an appreciative mind sit and ponder this simple little fact. There, woven from the ends of the nerves and tendons, was 3 sets of male and female reproductive organs, 3 cocks with balls, and 3 vaginas perfectly surgically removed and put in decoration on the bottom rib bones, dangling and entangled in the sinew tissue in pattern style, male, female, male, female, male, female. The third down the line was the lower torso, in which there wasn't much fleshy tissue. It was mostly bone wrapped in flesh around the hips, with the lower half of the spine broken off in the middle. What made the piece interesting was that there was a leg sticking out, popping out of the ripped out genital area foot first, protruding from the carved out vaginal opening, and was stuck tightly crammed in the most peculiar way at the mid-thigh part of the leg, that boggled the mind as to how someone could shove a leg in such a manner from inside out. The fourth art piece was definitely an interesting one, although simple. It was a complete arm and legs sewed together in thick intestinal lining stitches, sewn together by the stumps, stump to stump. The shape of the limbs made together as one was a letter S. The fifth was an abstract piece of carved flesh. It was mostly skin ripped from the torso and wrapped around a dehydrated brain that resembled a football, although couldn't be described as such, considering the dried lungs that were sewn on either side that resembled butterfly wings. This particular piece was a tribute to rebirth through photosynthesis within Stu's sick and twisted mind that was beautifully crafted. The sixth flesh sculpture was an entire body of a long-dead corpse that was stretched out and gnarled around another more preserved unidentified corpse. One impaled corpse on a big thick spike carved from a still well-rooted planted ancient oak tree turned into an impalement spike was the base. The young corpse was wrapped around the elder in a most peculiar way. The once left arm was wrapped tightly around the shoulder of the impaled dried corpse's carcass. The right arm wrapped around the dried carcass, and its fingers disappeared into the anus and cupped the bulbous, unidentifiable genitalia area. The seventh death tribute was a mass of wadded internal organs of 3 corpses balled up into one. The 3 hearts were gathered together and side by side under the stomachs which touched under them. 6 kidneys circled around them, with a basketed woven ball of guts, intestines. 3 livers, spleens, and pancreases lay lacquered on each heart and stomach. The bladders were placed on the top of the intestinal wad, looking like a cap or a northern continent on this obscure sphere. The 8th sculpture was a geometrical 5-point pentagram within a sphere. The sphere was comprised of bones from human limbs. Its construction resembled an old elementary school moon climber style jungle gym, only designed with human bone compared to stainless steel. The sphere was a little sloppy, but still visually accurate as a sphere, although quite jagged. It was tied together with dried major arteries. The pentagram inside was looped veins, intricately woven, as if the hands of a century-old Cherokee saint basket weaver had crafted the macabre beauty to behold. The 9th flesh sculpture was a carved corpse. The man had his sexual organs removed, and his hands were stuffed up in the crevice of the absence. His legs were literally tied in a pretzel shape. The head was removed, and his skull was not part of this art piece. The man's long-bearded face was sewn onto the chest, as the long beard draped down the stomach, tickling the wrists that bent to fit the crammed hands. The 10th art piece was what appeared to be rose petals on the countertop that made a 6-point pentagram. What appeared to be rose petals, upon closer inspection, was flayed pieces of dried dehydrated inner flesh from muscle tissue. There in the center was the skull with lacquered preserved eyeballs sitting on the extended pointed tongue. The glare of the glaze in the eyes still somehow captured the illusion of life, leaving from flesh to spirit as the head was removed. Dried blood was sprinkled about. The 11th freak of nature abomination was a split-in-half torso turned upside down that had lacquered split guts, frozen in spewed suspension as if captured upon disembowelment. How one could capture this scene is beyond rationality within a remotely sane mind. Imagine an upturned stump revealing the roots of a once healthy ancient tree, and this is the best visual depiction of a visual description one would be able to receive. The 12th piece down the line was dark in nature. Curled in a ball was a 69 shape of male and female dwarves that had been slashed and mutilated all over their bodies. Their hands gripped each other's hips and caressed each other forever in death. The final 13th piece cannot be mentioned. The 13th was far too gross and evil to ever be documented. Only the eyes of the damned could witness the atrocity before their own executed death would ever see it before screaming into madness, before absolute mind loss that is caused by the initial visual rape of the senses.